Hello everybody and welcome back to Spacedock. I'm SOJOURN and today we're having a look at the concept of cyberspace as popular sci-fi uses it, and the way it's been portrayed over the years. And by cyberspace I mean some interpretation of computer code and programs and data transformed into a world and characters, not something as simple as a virtual environment. There may very well be a VR interface to access cyberspace, but VR by itself doesn't count, so no Ready Player One. Naturally, we have to start with Tron. This trend-setting, whimsical take on things made the digital world just that, a whole different world inside the computer. Programs are people going about their business, and it's not treated like a mere representation of things. That's literally how it works, as we can see from a person being digitized into the world. And that truly iconic world itself really solidified what sci-fi cyberspace was. The black objects with glowing edges, occasionally patterned with circuit board tracery or barcodes, is just instantly recognizable, and was even taken across to the real world in the movie. It stems from the way people saw and interacted with computers at the time, using cathode ray displays. But it's not just those things, there's also terrain and water and canyons and caves. For whatever reason, it's not purely artificial, adding to the feeling that it is a world unto itself. The art style isn't all that way though. The fully CG sections don't need to lean into that idea because they're already computer generated. All those cool vehicles painstakingly made using extremely basic methods can't be made to look any more CG than they already do. Oh, and those vehicles show another side of the setting, linking the digital world with the various games that Flynn made. The light cycles, recognizers, and tanks are all taken from those games, with the last one also being used as a tool for hacking. The Solar Sailor comes from an unfinished spacecraft design that was being simulated on Encom's network, which was abandoned and then co-opted for traveling around that network. Then there's Sark's command carrier, which seems to be a thing possibly made by the Master Control program, or more likely stolen by him, to allow his best agent to move around the Encom network, or even outside of it. And this networking stuff is kinda crazy because at the time, the internet was barely even a thing. TCP/IP was standardized the same year the movie came out. We take computer networks for granted these days, but looking back at Tron now, the idea of arcade games being networked to a central core, like the intro implies, is kinda nuts. Tron Legacy does things a bit differently. It's still inside a computer and the programs are people and all that, but the visual style is massively updated. There's still glowy lines, but they're much more streamlined, and pretty much everything in the constructed environment of the city is smooth, shiny, and glass-like. There's still pseudo-natural environments that are rocky or watery, but they do have visual updates. I'll talk more about why this happened later on, but for now we move on to Mass Effect 3. In this mission later on in the game, Shepard enters a server for the Geth Consensus, but unlike Tron, this is not how it actually looks. The cyberspace that Shepard is seeing is a processed, filtered version of the raw data, intended to allow an organic mind to perceive it as something familiar, so it becomes a physical space made of voxely cubes and self-creating metal panels, rather than whatever it is the software Geth see it as. Inside the Consensus are bits of Geth code infected by the Reapers that need to be dealt with, and along the way various historical recordings from the birth of the Geth are shown to the player. This mission is neat for two reasons. One, it shows the Geth side of history, which until now was only presented to the player via the Quarians, and two, it actually brings up how the cyberspace we traverse as the player is not how things actually are. The last cyberspace cyberplace I'm highlighting today is the Claptastic Voyage DLC for Borderlands the pre-sequel. This little adventure sees the players heading into the programming of a robot called Claptrap to retrieve a secret data cache hidden within. This is done using the ubiquitous Digistruct technology in the setting, which is used to make weapons, vehicles, robots, and even people. That last one means it acts as the fast travel tech in the series, and it's also the mechanic used to respawn. With all these possibilities, sending someone into cyberspace is just a natural extension of this technology. The first thing that makes the Claptastic Voyage stand out for me is that it starts presenting everything as if it is a physical space within Claptrap, complete with wires and even a view out of his camera eye. It's not actually a miniaturized world, but it's still a fun take on the cyberspace idea and provides the link through the DLC's title back to its inspiration, the 1966 movie Fantastic Voyage. The various NPCs in the world are either directly Claptrap's consciousness, which is especially amusing when you're playing the game as Claptrap, or some personification of a part of him, either a literal part of his software like sysadmin here, or of his anxiety or other part of his personality, or the insecurity bots that act as enemies. There's also bugs and viruses to fight, as well as the occasional amusing ad bot. But the funniest thing along those lines for me was the literal pop-up ads that jump out of the ground in front of you, complete with little X to close them. Going this route for the opening area you traverse as a player also makes subsequent areas you go to, like Claptrap's memories, have a different feeling and vibe. And that's another thing the DLC does differently, since it's also a take on the classic idea of going into somebody's mind. You get an idea of what makes him tick, and of the things he's internalized. I already mentioned Claptrap's anxiety and the insecurity bots, but there's also incarnations of other characters talking negatively about him. And the story of the DLC itself goes through his memories of specific places and events, sometimes poking fun in a fourth wall breaking way at the first game, or taking a more serious look at things the player has never seen until now. Those memories that he's wrapped up in denial, concealing the terrible things that occurred due to his actions. The other thing the DLC does that I really like is the way it starts to play with the fact the setting isn't meant to be real, including Escher-esque environments to traverse, changing up the orientations and scales of objects, and playing with the way games can alter an environment. All these different elements make the DLC a very clever mixture of various tropes to create something that feels unique and special. It provides a great example of the way the portrayal of cyberspace has evolved along with computers. Audience interactions with digital devices has increased massively since the days of Tron, from being maybe something you'd see in an office to multiple devices every day, everywhere. Even the way people interact with them has changed, from clicky-clacky keyboards and big floppy disks, or even tape, to slick touchscreens and wireless networks. The power of computers and the subsequent improvements in CG has also changed the entire way visuals are done, both in terms of art style and on a technical level. The original Tron was a mix of weird costumes with backlit animation, throwing in the occasional bit of traditional animation and some of the earliest computer-generated 3D images. Now we have CG so photoreal it can be confused for physical props, and even real-time graphics in games has gotten exceptionally good. Mix these changes over time together and standards have risen, and with them so has what cyberspace even means. Arguably, the concept itself has actually become fairly quaint. There's just so much connectivity in real life now. Everyone can talk to the little people in their phone at any time, or look up information, or play a game, or anything else they want to do. It's just normal. It's mundane. There's not much room for romanticization of the way things inside them work, outside of the grandfathered-in concept of sci-fi cyberspace from before all this happened. And all of that is why the art style of Tron has diverged so much from the original, and why modern cyberspace things may try to do more with it than merely venturing inside. This isn't always the case though. They may try to do a more up-to-date take on things, like Ghost Runner's voxely, glowy Cybervoid, which still uses circuit board traces, or Cyberpunk 2077's glorious projected pixel style. I find it so interesting to look at the ways such a well-known and definitely tropey side of sci-fi has changed over the years, matching the ways the real-world use of digital devices has evolved. And yet, there's also the self-referential element to it, and pop culture in general, as those earliest interpretations defined what cyberspace even was. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate and spacefighter design reference books. Alternatively, you can support us directly through YouTube by becoming a channel member. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.